Vanessa, thank you so much for joining us. How you doing?
Thank you for having me. I'm doing great. Yes, this week has been crazy, so I'm glad for this distraction.
Yes, it really has been, for sure. I want to start from the very beginning when you worked at Target and was a retail buyer. What were some of the key lessons that you learned as a retail buyer getting pitched, I'm sure, constantly from brands to get into retail? What were some of the lessons you learned from as a retail buyer?
Great question. Before I was a buyer at Target, I actually worked for Neutrogena on the marketing side. So, my entire viewpoint from that time forward was how do you appease the buyer? What does it take to ensure products sell on shelf? So when I finally landed in the role as a buyer, it was very eye-opening. Yes, you get pitched a lot. And I think what I realized was that, in order to be successful in a retailer like Target that has 30,000 plus SKUs, tons of foot traffic, you really need to have a brand already that has consumer demand and brand awareness. And you need to have all of your kinks ironed out. And by that I mean everything from the kinks in your supply chain. You need to figure out your marketing levers. You need to figure out basically how to drive sales. Because if you wait until Target or any national or major retailer to figure it out, it's going to be a very expensive lesson. You have a lot of inventory in those big supply chains, and if you make any mistake, that's a very expensive mistake to make. So that was the lesson. It's expensive, so get it right, nail it before you scale it.
So what do retail buyers care about? Do they care about the actual product innovation? Do they care about past sales? What specifically do they care about when brands come to them?
First and foremost, sales. What sales are you gonna drive in my store? And the best way for them to gauge that is by understanding your current sales traction. That gives them a way to foresee or project what sales might be in their stores. Number one, that's what they care about. Sales also is a proxy for how good your product or your brand is. If you have a product that has reached product market fit, it will reflect in sales. So really that sales number is a cheat for everything. It also tells them that your marketing is working, right? If your marketing is not working, no one's gonna be buying you. So it all boils down to sales. But in addition to that, it is marketing power and it's supply chain execution. Can you get product to the right place in the right time? No more, no less, no day early, no day late. It has to be executed flawlessly. Because again, if you can't execute flawlessly through the supply chain, they're not generating sales, right? So it all comes back to sales. And sales velocities more specifically, not just $30,000 in a week. It's you are driving 5 units per store per week consistently and repeatably.
What if you aren't in stores? So you don't have any velocities in stores, you just have your e-com data, whether that's DTC or whether that's Amazon or TikTok Shop. But what are the types of things for us on that data, which is quite different than retail data? How do you, when you're pitching retail, how do you kind of express that this product will be successful in retail?
Yes, great question, because retailers and retail buyers have learned a lot in the last 5 to 10 years on, about DTC brands and what it takes to select and launch DTC brands correctly and well. These days they understand AOV, they understand LTV, but sometimes you still need to translate it in terms that they understand, right? So basket size, AOV, basket size, or for long-term value, you're talking about your repeat purchases and your loyalty and how the purchase cycle, how often is your average customer coming back to purchase again and again? And then of course, what that value is. So they're understanding these things, but by and large, retailers have still made lots of missteps with launching DTC brands. Target did a great job taking a leap with bringing in these DTC brands, but as the ones that they brought in early on were the ones that had already great brand awareness, and these are brands that also had created a community, created consumer demand, created brand value, and so that was a lot easier for Target to translate that into their stores. Since then, they've brought in brands with a variety of and degrees of awareness, and they've been somewhat successful and somewhat not. But the biggest lesson that Target and these retailers have learned is that a lot of these DTC brands couldn't execute in terms of supply chain because they're not used to retailer supply chain. And they also didn't always have the right marketing toolkit to be successful in store. They thought that the same toolkit that they used to drive DTC sales would work in stores, and it's a little bit different. So there have been a lot of I think there's been a reckoning. It was a wild, wild west for a while where retailers were bringing in tons of DTC brands. They're still doing it, but now they're a little bit more wiser.
What is better if you have a small customer base if you're a DTC brand, but high repeat purchase rate, or you have a large customer base, but maybe the repeat purchase rate is not quite as strong?
Good question. I think the former, as long as you are reaching a niche in a way that is incremental and different than any other brand or product or vendor in that store. So if you are reaching that niche very well, they'll prefer that. Because at the end of the day, they are building basically a bunch of they're putting together an assortment of brands that meet a specific consumer's need and a specific audience. And when you cobble that together, you basically have, the broad reach that you're looking for.
Yeah, I guess the former, as long as the niche isn't too niche and that, maybe that's your only customer set,
Correct. And they're willing to take a bet on niches that they think are emerging and will become a much larger pool of consumers in the future. So they're also kind of hedging their bets a little bit.
How do category managers manage also making their buys when it comes from emerging brands versus incumbent brands? Because I'd imagine short term you probably want more of the incumbents because they already have that brand recognition and name, but long term you might want innovation, which typically comes from more like the emerging brands.
Yeah, really great question, because at the end of the day, buyers are tasked to hit a certain financial goal at the end of the year. And of course, the easiest way to do that is to keep your incumbents that are tried and true and have that recognition and have that proven track record. But at the same time, you know that you can't be stagnant because the world changes so quickly, especially with how much has been disrupted in retail in the last, 15 to 20 years. They know they need to stay ahead of the game and place bets. So, a couple of things, with regard to that. Number one is the puppet masters at Target, or whomever the C-suite knows that they need to task their category managers and buyers to hit a certain level of innovation. Because if they don't task them with those goals, people are just going to game it and sandbag things with just bringing in the tried and true. So most buyers actually are tasked with bringing in 10% innovation every year, or testing and learning. They're encouraged to try and take risks. But at the same time, a buyer also knows that if they're going to make their career there, they need to place really great bets. Like that buyer that brought method in, 20 plus whatever years ago, made made their career. So everyone's, very ambitious and always trying to make their stamp, put the stamp in.
How also dive into a bit on the analytics side as well. In e-commerce, it's such an amazing plethora of analytics that are available, right? AOV, there's obviously what your LTV is, what your repeat purchase rate is, and once you get into retail, you don't quite have a lot of those same data sets. You just kind of know what velocities you're having and what your targets are, but you also don't know on the marketing side the brand awareness, if it's working or maybe if it's not working. I guess in some senses because if that translates into higher velocities or not. But going from, I'd imagine if you're a DTC brand and have all these amazing analytics, it must be quite tough going into retail and realizing, oh my gosh, I can't make these kind of insights based off of data. When a brand first entered retail, how should they even think about data?
So you're right. It's so much more of a guessing game in retail. And this is why sometimes you'll catch me saying that DTC marketing is actually science, whereas, marketing for an omnichannel retail world is a little bit of art and science. So yes, there are a lot less data points that are easy to access when you're in retail. At best, from retailers, you get perhaps sales velocity and weekly sales and measures like that. And oftentimes, you're having to buy more, whether it's buying spins data, numerator data, which is shopper insights, basket insights. So you definitely have to spend more time artfully guessing in retail, but the real cheat for that, and it's going back to CPG basics, is understanding your consumer, right? Understanding who your consumer is, how they're driven to purchase, what are their key purchase drivers, what is their path to purchase, how are they finding out about your category and the different brands in your category, how are they making their decisions and considering your brand. It's taking that same funnel that you use in DTC marketing, right? Awareness, consideration, interest, conversion, et cetera, repeat, and figuring out in real life in a much more omni-channel, multi-channel way, how are people, how are your consumers learning about your category and your brand, and how are they reaching that point of purchase. So that becomes then a little bit of the science and the art as well. It's understanding that path to purchase and plotting your marketing plan along that journey. And again, you have data points for some of those points of the journey, and then in other places, you have to make your best guess based on qualitative insights.
So path to purchase, I'd imagine besides the insights that you might learn D2C, understanding what the path to purchase is. Customer interviews is yes. That typically how you get a lot of that access? What are some of the questions then are the right questions to even to also ask your customers in terms of, is it also like where they shop? I'd imagine that there's a lot of other questions too that you should be asking your customers.
Yeah, I mean when you're asking your customer questions, it's a little bit of an indirect route. Like you're not trying to lead them. You're not trying to give them like an answer choice that's binary or lead them to a specific answer. You're really just asking open-ended questions about, for instance, maybe their need state in a certain category. Let's say you're a supplements brand. It's asking them a little bit about kind of their nutrition and health ethos and what kind of they're seeking with their health, and then how do you find out about this information? Most people will say followers or Google. Okay, well, and then you'd ask them to tell stories about, how they go about, the last time you purchased supplements, how'd you go about learning about that particular, set of brands that you considered? It's just asking them to tell stories and just keep probing and probing. And again, the thing here is to not just take what one person says as gospel, but to repeat this line of questioning across many customers, and you'll start being able to pick out the trends and kind of extrapolate what to do with those trends. Again, you're not taking their word as gospel. You're using this to inform kind of what's working and what's not working. You're using it to basically create hypotheses, and then you go out and validate those hypotheses, right? You go out and A/B test, you go out and deploy a certain marketing tactic, and then you see if that hypothesis that you kind of gathered from these customer interviews ring true. So
I'm sure that the answer is it's always never enough, but what's maybe the minimum number of customer interviews? I'm sure there's not a maximum, but what the minimum number that you might then have a really good kind of feel in terms of your customers' path to purchase.
So I'll preface by saying that when I began my career, it started in consumer research for an agency where they absolutely prize precision and eliminating all bias. And then I spent the last 20 years in the startup world. So I'm going to give you a startup answer, which is if you speak to 12 customers in a 4 to 6 week period of time, that should be enough for you to pull out trends, especially if you're, and it's also who you pick to speak with. For DTC brands, this is where your first party data becomes really, really powerful, right? It's not just like the quantitative data you get from them, but you can pull their purchase history, right? See how often they've purchased, and just handpick your light, medium, and heavy customers, reach out to them and speak with them. Understanding your current customers, how they view your brand and your brand strengths, how they themselves live their lives, what is their, not just demographic, but what's their psychographic, what are their attitudes, their motivations, their pain points, right? A lot of the things that, I explained in kind of the customer questions that you ask. But speaking with 12 of them, you'll quickly get a good sense. And then if you're smart, and you have some extra money, you'll validate that in a larger quantitative research with general population. But honestly, for startups, especially early on, that's enough for you to run so much faster.
Oh, that's a great point. I'm also kind of curious if you think that there is going to be a change of how brands launch. I think like the natural progression, at least in the last 10, 15 years, is D2C, and then or maybe Amazon, but some type of e-commerce in order to get into a retail. We've seen now a couple brands that have started in retail, or even you go to their D2C site and it says shop on Walmart, for example, that it's no longer you can actually shop directly on their website. Do you think that is going to be a trend when it comes to sales channels and distribution, that it's no longer going to be starting purely D2C?
I still think DTC is a phenomenal way to go to market at first. You learn so much in doing so, and it's all within your control, so to speak. And you can use that time to de-risk your business, ensure product market fit, and then also figure out if you have the right price points, if you truly, the consumer you hypothesize is actually the consumer who is buying. I mean, this is your time to validate a lot of hypotheses and assumptions. And to me, that's just good startup, startup fundamentals. So you want to do that before you get into retail, right? Again, you want to de-risk before getting into retailer supply chains. I think, the brands that have launched straight into retail and been successful are few and far between. Oftentimes they are, second time, third time, 4-time founders of brands that have exited and are well known already in the CPG space. Back to Method, Eric Ryan and him launching Ollie and many other brands. So I think you have some unique instances where you can do that because you have the money, the know-how, and the trust with the retailers. Conversely, you may also just be a brand that has strong marketing power, whether it's because you have a shit ton of money or you've got a celebrity influencer who is at the helm of your brand that can give you that marketing power. I think then that gives you a little bit more of a fighting chance, and then retailers, of course, are a little bit more willing to pony up. But still, it's a very high risk way to launch a business. Like you still want to de-risk your business, and DTC is the way to do it. Finally, if it's not DTC, it is starting regional. I still think like going back to the basics, starting regional or with a smaller set of retailers is a great way to begin. But again, DTC has made it so much more, easier to de-risk.
Yeah, and I guess at the same time, it also de-risks for the retailer too, since then you have your own then you obviously have like your own data, and then you can and then you can actually make a much better argument in terms of why you should actually get into retail.
Absolutely.
Is there a minimum threshold, do you think, from that kind of traditional route, not the method founder, or even I think like Jake Paul launched W a couple weeks ago. That was Walmart first. The traditional route of going to D2C, is there like a minimum threshold from revenue that then it makes sense to go into retail, or isn't there?
Is there one magic number? I wish. That would be really easy. No, there isn't. I mean, you force me to, if you were to force me to say a number, I'd say probably 5 million. But really, what the thinking is you want to make sure that you've de-risked your business, but you also have like a repeatable sales trend, right? So let's just take DTC as the channel. If you have if you have the ability to predict your monthly sales and it to be generally in the ballpark, to me that means you have repeatable sales, right? You've figured out acquisition and you've figured out repeat. Maybe you don't know exactly how you figured it out, but it's happening, and that's why those numbers are steady and repeatable, and you have a sense for how to to get them to kind of to tick up. And of course, I'm assuming here you've got great inventory control and you've got no issues in your supply chain. So, right, because that's always a so yeah, it's this idea that you have a repeatable sales, repeatable sales. That to me is when you're ready to go into retail.
Got it. If you're a brand and you just launch into retail, right? You get the PO, and then really the real work starts, right? Because then it's because getting to retail is half the battle. It's staying in retail that they actually want to continue coming back for more. What are some of the considerations on how you actually should think about launching in your first retail account? In terms of just making sure that you have you're going to perform and that you're actually going to be able to service number of velocities or hit your goals from the beginning.
Yeah. This is a very tactical answer to that question, but if you have a marketing plan that is full funnel, and by that I mean you're investing in brand awareness at the same time investing in sales at point of purchase and then kind of everything in between, I think that is what sets you up for success. This then goes back to what I was saying about knowing your consumer's path to purchase, so you can lay your marketing plan and marketing mix across that path to purchase. But for that first account, I would again, very tactical, I would focus a lot of the marketing tactics on point of purchase, maybe last mile, but definitely in-store point of purchase, and then a shit ton of brand awareness on top of that, and then fill in the funnel as time goes on.
Are you able to give an example of when a company really understood the point of purchase and whether it's insights learned through data and also as well through conversations with customers, how that led to how they actually thought about brand awareness campaigns in retail or marketing campaigns in retail in order to drive sales?
Yeah. So one brand that I work with, they work in the Femme health space and the menstruation space. And before they dug into consumer insights, they had just assumptions. Their assumption was that if you went on promo in store enough times, that would be sufficient for driving sales. What they ended up doing, of course, was training their consumer to buy on deal. But through consumer insights, what they also realized was that a lot of their initial customer acquisition and sales in store came from word of mouth. There is this dynamic that when you are this product is a menstrual cup, right? So it's not a pad, it's not a tampon, it's a menstrual cup. And menstrual cups, so the way they grew in market was through word of mouth. Women attesting to their experience with a menstrual cup, and that storytelling being really powerful in getting other women to try and convert. And so when we understood that this was the dynamic that was working early on in their journey, we brought that back to the marketing here, relied more heavily on that, but also what we realized when understanding the path to purchase was that this is a planned purchase. This is definitely not an impulse purchase. This is a planned purchase, but it's so planned far in advance, and it's not a regular purchase. You don't go every month and buy a cup, a menstrual cup. You have to like remind people that they need it. Like it's a high intent purchase that people just forget that they need it at the point of purchase. And so then we also laid ads, again, just outside a store, bus shelters, outdoor advertising, to kind of remind them before they head into store that, oh yeah, I need to pick up a menstrual cup, I forgot. So.
Wow. Oh, that's really interesting.
I more than you ever wanted to know about menstrual cups.
No, not at all. Not at all. But it is interesting about how like the actual marketing was actually outside the store to actually make sure that, hey, don't forget.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Got it. No, it's really cool. How also, when you're a brand, how often should you check in with the category manager too and kind of manage that relationship?
Okay. So that's a tough one because it also depends on
how big of
a brand you are, right? Because you
let's
want
say
to
you're
be
like an
pesky.
emerging brand, like a I don't know, 0 to 10 million, let's say.
Okay. All right. So I am all about quality touch points. So obviously you have the category review and line review that happens either every 6 months or every year. Meanwhile, what I would do is probably reach out to the category buyer when there's news to share, right? Maybe you've got a huge marketing hit coming up, and you want to bring their attention to it, not only to just tell them how great you are, but also to kind of get them ready for the sales upside that might come from it. So it's again like you're catering your touch points to how it benefits them. So yeah, there's no like cadence. It's more so like try and have meaningful things to reach out about. And again, it's all about driving sales. So how does what you're telling them help them drive sales? So again, if there's a marketing hit coming up, let them know. If you've got back to consumer research. If you've got some consumer research data that is helpful for them in understanding the consumer in their category, share that with them. So again, yeah, it's quality over quantity. Definitely don't wait until only line reviews to speak with them. Check in with them. Summarize your sales performance for them. But again, don't waste their time.
No, that makes sense. How also do you think about expanding your accounts or getting into or whether you should get into new regions or even double down in your current region if you're only in one region? For example, when does it make sense, if given the opportunity, to scale with a national retailer? Let's say you're just in that retailer regionally and you have the opportunity to scale nationally, versus double downing on that region and getting into other accounts in that same region.
Yeah. So yeah, what's the best way to scale your growth? So the way is that
much better put.
So the way I like to think about it. So I'm also maybe a little bit old school in this regard, but like if you think about the world of retail, you can plot like whether it's food or whether it's beauty, you can plot all retailers on a bell curve, and in this bell curve, on the left-hand side are like the early adopter retailers, and as you move up the curve to the top of the bell-shaped curve, that's like your mass retailers that are kind of offering the products to the mainstream, and then beyond that, you've got kind of like the end of your life cycle kind of retailers like Kohl's or TJ Maxx or grocery bargain outlet if you're in the food business. So when you think about expanding, you actually kind of want to generally follow that bell curve from left to right, starting with the early adopter retailers, working your way into mainstream. Kind of a general kind of rule of thumb. Mostly because oftentimes on the left side of the curve, you've actually got smaller retailers. Early adopter retailers are typically smaller. Think about Erewhon in the food space, 13 stores, or so that's generally a good kind of way of approaching it. And then in terms of regional, I think this depends on the product category you're in. If you're in beauty, it's hard to do like a regional play because of the way the beauty retail landscape is. You just, go national pretty much right away after DTC. A lot of those regional retailers have gone away, unfortunately. But in food, especially if you're, distributed through UNFI or KeHE, a lot of the way in which they grow their brands is by warehouse. And you want to, pull as much retailers through one warehouse first before moving on. Yeah.
My final question to you: what's one CPG trend, could be beauty, personal care, or food and beverage, that you're bullish on, that you think there's a lot of opportunity, and one that you actually are quite bearish on, that you maybe think is overhyped?
Yeah. Maybe it's because I was speaking with Sarah about this, but what comes to mind is, okay, so for the one that I'm bullish on, it's Femme health. There is so much untapped in Femme health, and especially in like pelvic wellness. So that's like vulva, vaginal stuff. There's so much of it has been considered taboo and not talked about, and women are beginning to talk more about these things. You also have just the macro trend of consumers taking health into their own hands, and trying to be more preventative and proactive rather than like deal with things on an acute basis. And so I think there's a lot there that there is to explore, and it touches a woman in all cycles of her life, all hormonal cycles of her life. So I think that's one area. And then for a trend I'm bearish on, oh man, I hope no one in here is from there. I am so sick of like liquid death. It's bottled water has always been about branding and marketing, but you also have to have a good product to back it up. And it's so trend driven. It's so like, it's almost like fashion. Like you're in one moment and you're out the next. And so I think that's just so overhyped, and all the copycats that have come about, like just stop.
Okay, first of all, I really appreciate you actually answering that question about what you're bearish on, because not many people, and name names, yeah, seriously, and name names. This is being recorded, by the way, just letting you know. No, really appreciate it, because a lot of people talk about the opportunity and bullish. They're happy to speak about that, and it's great. And then bearish, they don't want to kind of call everyone out. So I appreciate it. That's all I got. Any questions from the crowd? Yeah.
You were interesting because you were saying how the marketing is different from DTC to in-store retail. Could you give us some examples what works for retail?
Yeah. Yeah, I'll start conceptually because I like to start there first before getting into examples, which makes for a long answer, so thanks in advance. So if you think about DTC, a lot of the ads that are focused on like driving impulse sales conversions, right? So it's very like push, whereas marketing for retail requires a little bit more than just that. You have that, which is like the in-store promotions, but you have a lot more brand value creation, consumer demand creation. You're building a relationship with your consumer, and you're really just creating a brand as well. So I would say you've got a little bit of push and pull with retail marketing, and sometimes with DTC, it's a little bit more reliant upon the push. And so when you go into retail, being a DTC brand, sometimes there's a little bit of a reckoning there, and a little bit of a little bit of tension there with these brands not being able to, like, why isn't it working why is what we're doing not working in retail stores? It's because they haven't been investing in that top funnel piece of brand value creation.
Great question. Anyone else? Other questions? Oh, here we go. Right here first.
So I wrote the notes in here. So, one of those questions back into the beginning that you talk about, also the price. Also, that's something that important to the factor that buyers would buy. What would be a range of approximate ratios between a company provided to target compare the market price to, so we have somewhat of knowing what to aim for?
So Is your question about margins? Like what should the margins be? Like what should you sell a product to a retailer for? So that was the question. So it depends. It depends on the product category because every product category has its kind of average margins, if you will. So what category are you in?
We are in coffee and beverage business.
Okay. I don't know the margins offhand of coffee, but because it is grocery, it's generally a lot lower than beauty, for example, right? So it could be probably in the anywhere between, 20 to 40% margin. But here's what you do. You ask your retailer. Retailers are so happy to answer that question because it doesn't waste your time, doesn't waste their time. They're usually pretty upfront. Like they'll say, I need something between 35 and 40%. And so what that means basically is like it's oh my gosh, I can't do the math on the spot, but basically that's, the cut that they take of the full SRP.
So earlier you also mentioned that the marketing kit that will go with the display with the product. So who will be bearing that cost, the store or the?
For displays?
Yes.
So the question was who bears the cost of displays in store? The brands do. There is a common kind of idea that like once you get into a retail store, like your marketing is done. The store will do the marketing for you. You just sit back and let the sales roll in. It's actually quite the opposite because there's so many brands and products in that store. It takes more marketing to stand apart, and retailers don't want any part of that. It's all funded by you. So that also includes displays. Yeah, it's all funded by the brand.
And that's part of the reason why retail is so expensive, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's why the first question is very important to include in those other expenses that come
Correct.
along with the price, so we can have a better.
Correct. And a lot of retailers will also tell you, and we expect that you contribute to marketing co-op by, about this much. Like Target gives very explicit like guidance on what, they want you to spend on everything.
Yeah, I mean, it probably makes sense even before you start a brand, just to even know once you do get into retail, if e-commerce works, once you do get into retail, that you're actually priced correctly. Because I interview quite a few investors, and some of them are like, this brand's working really well on online, and it does really, and they make it work in terms of their margin profile online, but it doesn't make sense for them to actually go into retail and scale that way just because their margin profile is not so great.
And it's a tough, that's never a good time to learn that
Totally.
about your product.
Always more challenging to lower your prices. Right?
It is.
To raise your prices.
It is. So I tell every entrepreneur who comes to me saying, I have an idea. It's like, okay, great. I have an idea. I need you as a I need your marketing help. No, you don't. You need a CFO. You need a fractional CFO or whomever, to build you out a pro forma P&L, and you need to understand in advance, what your COGS and your SRP are going to be, and then you need to now do the research to make sure that when you have all of your distribution partners loaded in, right? You think about, okay, where do I want to be selling in 10 years from now? Find out what their costs are, costs of doing business with them are, including all that marketing spend, and build that into your pro forma P&L, and then take a look and be like, and see, do I have the right COGS? Can my SRP support that? And am I going to make money? And is this even worth it?
Barry, do you have a question?
Actually, I was gonna try to go further into what kind of slotting fees and programs that you see or that you require from a new product, and then, but mainly I was wondering if you could tell me some examples of ways that a new product has been discovered by you, what kind of packages you like to see them submit to you, what's the perfect example of the type of data that you'd like to see from a product with a sample to get on your radar and to, because I'm sure that sometimes people give you more information than you want that you don't have time to look through or not enough, and how you, to the conclusion that this is how I want to bet on this product, and if you can share some examples of some products that were really memorable to you.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Great question. So, okay, what information does a buyer need to see, right? Because yes, and samples, like how do you present all of this stuff? Because yes, people will throw a lot at you. Generally, it's and there are many kind of ways of going about it, but generally, to first land on the retail buyer's radar, a couple things. They're consumers too, so they're constantly searching the market. They're aware of what's out there in the category that they're buying. So if you've been doing things right, they will have heard of you. But if they haven't, definitely reaching out to them and answering that very first question that they always want to know, which is, how are you selling? Are you going to be successful in my store? So like share with them who your distribution currently is, what your sales velocity is. If you are selling DTC right, only at that moment, I would talk a little bit about, of course, kind of, how long you've been in market, kind of, your AOV, LTV, if you tell them monthly sales, they won't know what to do with that. Like they won't be able to translate that to their stores. And then, a link to Instagram. But you're not coming from a place of leverage when you're doing that. You want to be found by them. You want them to have heard of your brand and your products first. You want them to pull you in, because when they pull you in, that's also when the slotting fees start to disappear. Everything in retail is negotiable for the most part. They've become sticklers recently on payment terms and other odds and ends, but for the most part, slotting fees, new vendor fees, ad fees, all of that slides away when they want you. So again, this is another reason why it behooves brands to stay, in DTC longer or take the time to prove out their business and de-risk, because what that also does is it gives you time to not only have your brand mature in market, but also for them to have heard of you.
I guess kind of like a little bit of a follow-up question to that. When does exclusivities make sense? Like actually doing a exclusive with a retailer on a particular product, or even when you actually launch with them?
So exclusivity is funny because every retail buyer, I think, has a very different perspective. Sometimes buyers will like to ask for exclusivities just to ask for things. My perspective is that an exclusivity doesn't benefit my stores. Maybe it does if you give me a 6-month exclusivity, but if you give me a 1-year exclusivity, how is that truly benefiting me? Because the benefit of having your product line in several places is that it it lifts the tide for all boats. So yeah, I would like an exclusivity, a short one, so that I can get more than my fair share of the market, right? Like for instance, at Target and Walmart, they're constantly battling each other to bring in a brand first to get more than their fair share of the market. Whoever launches that brand first generally kind of, benefits from that. But yeah, you don't want an exclusivity for that long.
I know that it's a little bit different, but in beauty and personal care, like exclusive at Sephora, it's kind of almost like commonplace.
Yes.
But is that just because there's so far kind of few retailers that are like national in the beauty space that will also like how long do those exclusivities typically last?
Yeah. So the length of exclusivities very much differs. It's totally negotiable. As far as like those exclusivities with Sephora, the beauty market, I'm a little less familiar. The prestige beauty market, I'm a little less familiar with their expectations and rationale around exclusivities. But yeah, I feel like that's some like larger partnership that's happening with LVMH.
Got it. Okay. After you.
So since we are on that topic, do you think that would be better to offer exclusivities to particular products, or the whole brand have to stay in the one retailer?
Yeah, good question about how to carve out exclusivities, right? So you can do it based on time period. You can base it on channel. Like, okay, I will give exclusivity in the grocery channel or in the prestige cosmetics channel. Like you can kind of carve out channels as well, time period, like I said, or you can give them, a SKU. So maybe it's a variant, maybe it's a certain fragrance, a certain color, whatnot. So yeah, you can carve out those however way you want. And, usually a buyer, when they want an exclusivity, they'll just ask blanketly for like any kind of exclusivity. So then it's up to you to figure out what makes best sense based on your, understanding of your total business strategy and product line strategy.
Cool. Yeah, after you.
So I'm an alcohol, little, right, with cold chain alcohol. And there have been some retailers and cohorts that have come to us. We did a launch of a DTC, and we've shifted with the Tide laws a little bit different. We don't get to do both, right, with alcohol. So we've stopped the DTC and kind of did the proof of concept and have been now scaling to retail and basically doing all of our due diligence. But so retailers have reached out to us, Gelson's, Lazy Acres, Bristol Farms,
Great.
Albertsons, Vaughn's, Pavilions, like we've sampled them, but we don't have the financing to go to market yet, right? We've built a lot of our, like I said, like inroads and the models and the strategic plan, as well as distribution. We have everything turnkey, but now it's, is there a certain amount of time that we're going to lose interest from the time that they've called us to us going to market? I mean, the raising the money part has been an extraordinarily difficult thing for us this last year and a half. So, but we're hoping that tides will change. But that's basically where we're at. So we don't really have a relationship with them. We have contact. We've sampled them. They're interested. They like the whole thing, but
Yeah, generally I say you have until the next planogram. Planogram is locked in. And then with grocery, especially with regional grocers, they're bringing in brands, every 3 months. Like the cycles are much faster. So, with grocery, it might be a little bit more, a little bit more ambiguous. But yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, yeah, I think really what your sales team or what you can do is continue communicating with them with like meaningful updates. And again, it's like maybe like sharing news about your traction, about growth. But yeah, that's a tough one to balance. But that also is why manufactured is in the business of.
Well, that's why I'm here, right? I mean, this has been really, really valuable. Thank you so much for all of it.
Of course.
Cool.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Oh, here we go. Cool.
Sort of piggybacking on what other people have asked, but so as a small up-and-coming brand who's, we're still trying to figure out our sales trend and all that, how, we've reached out to retailers, right? But it's like, oh, here's the website, here's our phone number. It's so generic. How do you have advice onto like how to really get somebody to answer your questions, whom to direct calls or emails to? We took a chance and did a trade show, which was awesome because we got to meet people there face to face. But that's very expensive to do. So getting our LinkedIn properly set up. How do buyers find you if you don't have like a growing social media, things like that? So what are ways that we can sort of improve that connection between retailers and buyers as a small brand?
What product category are you in?
The baked goods.
And how long have you been selling?
It's kind of a weird situation, but we built our community over the last 15 years, but the product that we're actually selling or pushing now has been in the market for about 2 years. Which was a baked cookie that's done really well. Feedback's been great, but we're launching a mix. And so that we just launched on Amazon like a couple of weeks ago. And we started that as like frozen dough. So it's, it's been like varieties of
Got
that.
it.
So, yeah,
Got
totally.
it.
But we
Okay.
figured, mix is very stable, long shelf life. It's a good product to start with. And so we've been doing that since
Okay.
about a year, yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that information. So, I mean, generally, if you reach out directly to the buyer and find their email in some way or fashion, that's of course like the best route to go. And then it's all about what you say. So it is about pointing out what's different and unique about your product and how it is driving an incremental sale to their assortment, right? And usually if you're aligned with a consumer target that they're seeking, that's a great way to kind of get their attention. Like, okay, you fit into their business strategy, and you're offering a differentiated product, which would then indicate it'd be driving incremental sales. You're not cannibalizing existing products and brands on their shelf. So that's the approach to take. It's to present them with a business case for how you benefit their business. And oh, by the way, you've got a great differentiated product. So it shouldn't be about product. It should be all about how it meets their business needs.
Okay.
Can you repeat the last two things again?
Let's see. What did I say? I said it's a business case for how you meet their business needs. So how you drive incremental sales for them and how it's differentiated from current products on their shelf. Mm-hmm.
What's a typical shelf life that retailers look for like a baked good? Not like a mix, but like say a baked cookie.
So not the mix. Not the mix.
No.
Now freshly.
Mix is like on its own is like a year. I feel like that's pretty solid for a retailer.
Yeah, I mean, I'll answer a couple ways. I don't know specifically for baked goods because they do factor in shorter shelf life, but it definitely behooves you to, from an inventory control and to managing your inventory cost standpoint, it does behoove you to have a longer shelf life, and or it behooves you to have more practice selling to small retailers so that you understand velocity and product turnover so that you can be better prepared to work with larger retailers and minimize your what's the word I'm looking for? Your outdated goods.
Yeah. Loss. Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, any other questions? We have one more. Okay, cool. All right, here we go.
Might be going against the grain here. Under what conditions would it make sense for a successful DTC brand to not consider going retail?
Under what conditions? When you're selling really well and you've got really great margins and you don't, right? Because going from DTC to retail, you're also like building out a whole new team, new infrastructure. And if you don't have to, don't. And it also, I guess it depends on your goals. I mean, I think it's nice to leave a lot of retail for whoever acquires your brand, right? Leave them some runway to grow into. So it's nice to not saturate all sales channels. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know if that helps. Yeah. I know, in one SKU too.
Okay, one more question. Here we go.
Hi. My question is around profitability in retail. How long does it take for brands, say, and maybe this differs by category, whether it's beauty or personal care or food and bev, is profitability within the first year of launch at retail, is that an unrealistic expectation? And have you seen profitability at retail take longer than it used to? Or does it really depend on category?
Yeah, and profitability, like your profitability, like your...
Yes, like the brand is not losing money to be at Target or Sephora, but in fact is making money.
Yeah.
And around what revenue threshold might that be now these days?
I know. So good question. I mean, I think ultimately it boils down to your financial model and what you've deemed it to be when you need to break even. So it starts there with those like corporate financial goals. And then from there, it's deciding whether or not an account is worth doing business with. So you can negotiate with Target, you can negotiate with the account, see kind of where you land, run the numbers, run to see how does that push you back on your break-even goals, or does it stay within line? And then from there, you can make the strategic decision. Well, should we do this or not? I believe that there have been so many brands, especially VC-funded ones, that have been very loose with their financial control. That I don't know. It's never bad to say no. I'll wait later if it means keeping the lights on. You just might have to grow slower and leave that for the acquirer.
So I have another question. Just also to recap, obviously sales, that you can prove in the marketplace, it takes all the guesswork out for a buyer of whether or not this product has demand and can sell. But so you're aware of the product, it sells well, but do you find that multiple SKUs of a version of a product is something that is something that you look for or like or not really interested in, generally speaking? So like if I say I've got this great beverage, for example, and but now I've got 10 different variations of this beverage, is that better or worse to have more SKUs to get more product on the shelf, right? Because you might only order one pack of one type of drink, but if I give you 10 versions of it, then you're going to order 10 times that much, theoretically, at least. If, I'm a product maker, but I just would like to hear from a buyer's perspective if that's something that you like or dislike, because not all SKUs are going to have the same level of sales, but you'd still want to maybe carry as many of the product variations as possible, right?
Yes, this is a loaded question with a lot of a lot of things to say. So, okay. So at minimum, you want to launch in a retailer with enough of a brand block to be noticed, right? You don't want to be, it's not the end of the world, but you don't want to be that lonely SKU, like sandwiched between all these other brands. You'll never be found, unless you're AG1.
Right.
But with that, generally when you present to a buyer, you're presenting them with an assortment, and that assortment should be curated and edited based on that retailer, their customer, as well as what sells well. Most oftentimes you'll get the question from the retailer, you're presenting me 6 items, give me their rankings by sales. And they'll take the top 4 or 3 or whatever. But that's to start, right? That's how they start you off. From there, as you're adding SKUs, you have to be very deliberate about adding a SKU that is not going to cannibalize your existing sales too much. Sure, that will happen. But you truly want to do your best to have products that are as incremental to your existing line as possible. So it's maybe sometimes providing a SKU that isn't maybe addressing the same usage occasion, but a complementary usage occasion. This is where you kind of really get into, product strategy.
A lot of questions from product developers as well of whether or not they should add to more SKUs or not, if that's, because that's a big investment, and, hopefully the buyers will want all of your products. But like you said, you don't want to be that lonely SKU on a shelf that doesn't get any visibility. So if you can take up more of the shelf, that's a better option. But, so just, I just was curious from the buyer's perspective, what you prefer.
There's just so many ways to slice and dice it. But ultimately a buyer wants to have a vendor they can grow with, right? If I have an assortment with 100 items, I don't want to work with 100 companies to get those 100 items. If I can work with 10 companies to get those 100 items, that's perfect. That reduces my workload and creates a lot of supply chain efficiencies. So then it becomes up to the brand to really be strategic about the portfolio that they're building and maintaining and grooming. There's line extensions where you might have like a different flavor or variant or fragrance, and there's completely different products. And then, you can build a family of products, I'm not going to go into line architecture, but anyways, Yeah, I mean, it's a really great question, and
And then the other question that I had is, you were talking about exclusivity and how much sale pricing exclusivity plays into, like, you'll get the 2 weeks lead on a product at a sale price that nobody else will get, and if like, what kind of promotions or exclusivity programs do you think really resonate well in certain categories, if there's any that do better than others, and what kind of ideas that you might be able to share with other people of what they can do to try to get on the radar with a promotion that they would offer, like, I'm going to take out a billboard, I'm going to run all this ad, I'm going to drive all this traffic to your store, or is that a good approach to encourage intake and onboarding versus an exclusive sale, for example? So I'm just trying to give people a sense of some creative ideas that they would maybe try if they weren't getting a response from buyers, to try to incentivize them to take a chance on a product, and if there was any really creative ways that you've seen people come up with some promotions to incentivize a buyer to take a product in.
so a buyer. So most certainly, like, when there is like a big marketing activity, that does excite a buyer, because that generally means there should be a sales lift. But a buyer is not going to take in a vendor who doesn't meet the base minimum fundamentals of a good vendor, because of that promotion. Because what's going to happen when that promotion ends is the product line just going to sit there and collect dust. So yeah, the fundamentals of a good vendor still exist. You have to have sales traction as a proof point for future sales potential. You need to have like a well-oiled marketing kind of plan that generates sales reliably, and you have to have a good supply chain.
And then if they fail to meet, expectations, and it sits on the shelf, how important is returns to a buyer to be able to return product to unsold product?
Every vendor that enters a retailer signs a returns agreement at that very early stage that says you will, either buy it all back, or you'll pay for it to be destroyed, or, that is always negotiated up front. And that rarely will a retailer give on that. Sometimes they'll take a little bit of a hit if you're a good if you're a well-established vendor, but not for small brands.
So is that one of the few things? Remember you said everything in retail is negotiable. That's probably not one of the things that's not negotiable.
That one's not. Yeah, that one's not negotiable. Payment terms are not negotiable anymore. But yeah. Target no longer negotiates the co-ops. They used to, not anymore. Yeah, so it's changing, and I think it's definitely dependent on kind of the retail environment too. Like right after COVID, not that COVID's over, but after the closures and when everyone was just buying online, afterwards, a lot of retailers had. Their margin mix was all skewed because everything was going through online and not in stores. And so they had to set like a really firm digital contribution, like co-op, to kind of recoup all of that. Yes. Yeah, right?
What are some of the favorite brands that you've taken a chance on that you've brought in? Is there anyone that stands out in your mind?
Gosh, it's so, so when I was a buyer, it was long before the DTC, phenomenon started. So back then, we were saying no more often than yes. It was a lot of tried and true and very little innovation. So I can't say that I've taken in anything that to this day still, is there. But, I certainly was part of the advisors with Honest Company when they were first entering retail to help them figure out how to do it. And that was one of the first companies to make that DTC retail leap. And back then it was all Jessica Alba. That's what the buyers wanted.
Okay, a couple questions, but the first one was, you were talking about like additional product offerings. So is seasonal something that they consider? And, what are sort of the minimums in terms of the guaranteed sell-throughs that you need to have? And that goes into that second question, which is, if you're a new innovator company with a brand, how long do you have? How long do they give to you to actually do your sell-throughs?
So for seasonal SKUs, if you are a very new vendor, they're not interested in doing that because that's just fraught with supply chain risk. If you're a brand that has proven itself with sales and supply chain reliability, and if you're a grocery item, then yes, like if seasonal then becomes a little bit more palatable. What were your other questions?
No, it's just the other one was sell-throughs. How much time do we have? So, they're like, we need, if you're focused on a few stores, velocity, we need you to sell $1,000 a week. What are some of the number minimums?
Yeah.
And then if you do not hit them, how much time do you have before they're telling you to pick up your product?
So grocery is a little bit more flexible. I'll give you the Target answer first. At Target, I started tracking sales 6 weeks after store set date, and pretty much had an opinion 4 weeks from then. So I gave it like 4 to 6 weeks for the products to settle on shelf. Then I took a look at another 4 to 6 weeks of data, and then I made my decision there as to whether or not this brand was on my good side or bad side. And then you would start putting a little bit of pressure on them, and then you see how they kind of respond and if they're able to right size sales. And then at Target at that time, you change your planogram once a year, but you had a mini reset 6 months in. So then, depending on how bad things were, I might swap them out during that reset, or give them the other 6 months to recover. In grocery, it's a little bit more forgiving, but like every buyer will have a specific velocity threshold that they're expecting you to hit. And if you're below, their average velocity for their category, you better be in grocery. You better be promoting a lot to try and get those sales velocities up. But yeah, grocery has been a little bit more forgiving, but like a year maybe, before you're kicked out.
Gosh, I feel like that's really great. Somebody told me recently that you have a few months. But maybe in the liquor or grocery, it might be their turnovers are a little bit faster. I mean, you're doing resets. I think they're doing 2 resets a year. So you're doing, at Target, they were doing 1, or is that?
Target was doing 2 for the mini one, and then
Okay.
now they're just full on 1. But for grocery store, I know you can cycle in and out, but I don't know. I've not been on a food brand where they got kicked out that soon. Usually you get a little bit longer.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
Good to know.
yeah.
Okay, thank you for that.
So does Target do anything to help to marketing for the products in their store?
Will Target or any retailers help with marketing? And no, that's a hard no. It's all on the vendor to do the marketing. There are times when you are a well-established brand that you can do a little bit of negotiating, but you have to come up, pony up with a good amount of spend as well. But sometimes they'll share or throw you a bone and put you in a TV ad or put you in a circular. Yeah, usually you have to pay for it. Yeah, I mean, generally everything is pay for play, but on an occasion, if a buyer loves you enough, they will throw you a bone. They'll put you in the in one ad cut in the circular, or do something small for you, put you on an end cap or promo space. But again, those are for brands where they are very bullish and they think you're the future of that category.
Yeah, when the customers are really excited about it.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like Starbucks, positive also. I see Starbucks everywhere here, so. Starbucks? Yeah, so they don't need to do marketing for it, but it's everywhere now.
Franchise.
Well, thank you so much,
Of course.
Vanessa. Thank you so much for
Of
everyone
course.
for coming tonight. Thank you. Thank you so much,
Thanks
Vanessa.
for
I really
having
appreciate
me.
your time.
Thank you,
Really
everyone,
appreciate your
for
time.
staying and listening.
Thank you.
So, I think instead of me just asking the question, I think all of us here is, have a product and service you could sell, or looking for a buyer or some advice from the buyer perspective, but also very important, Susan pointing out, very important thing is, let's say when we get the order, right? How we get the money, and I know you are in the spotlight, but Steve, could you just explain to all of us here, what is your company role in supporting same launches buyer, the target?
Great question. So on the financing side, so we have two finance products. We have upfront inventory financing. So essentially, we're paying the manufacturer to create new inventory for when you, let's say, a Target or another retailer is interested and actually wants and places a PO for your products, and you need to create new products for that to actually launch with that retailer or that PO or fulfill it. So we do upfront inventory financing. Essentially, we're paying the manufacturer to actually create the new inventory, and then the brand essentially pays us back once the brand gets money back from the retailer. And on the other side, so that's one of our products, upfront inventory financing, and the other one is invoice factoring. As Vanessa pointed out, some of the terms when it comes to retail buyers, that's one of the non-negotiables. Typically, it's like net 90, for example, or net 120 terms, which means that once the goods are delivered, you would think that is when the retailer pays you, right? That would make sense. But it's actually more so that you actually invoice them, and then you actually they actually won't pay you for 90 days after they've actually received the goods, or 120 days, which really puts brands into a cash crunch. So what we do is that we do invoice factoring as well, which essentially what we're doing is we provide of what that PO value is. We essentially do a 50 to 80% upfront. We give you 50 to 80% of the value of that PO advanced. That was the word I was looking for. Advanced within 24, 48 hours of the goods being delivered. So then the brand has cash flow and doesn't have to wait the next 90, 120 days to actually collect the full, 100% of the balance. And then the remaining balance of it, then we would distribute to the brand once we would get paid by the retailer. Yeah.
Are there standard percentages on that factoring, or is it variable?
No, it's a great question. It's standard percentages, so it's 1% per 30 days, and minimum 45 days. So 45 days would be 1.5%. And then we also take a 0.75% off the total value for insurance. That's one time, the 0.75. A little bit different about us, and sorry, I didn't mean to have this as us pitching about our product, but how we're a little bit different, and when you do look at factors, is something to note. A lot of factors have very long-term agreements. Like it could be a year. It could also mean that everything within the fine print, everything that actually, if you factor with them, it means you have to factor everything with them, everything in retail. And maybe you actually do have some retail accounts that might be net 30 or might be net 10 or might be actually a lot more favorable to the brand. It might make sense. You don't want to do the 1% or pay. For us, it's on a per retailer basis. It's not actually long-term. We don't have any kind of long-term locked in, no monthly minimums. A lot of factors offer, say they have monthly minimums, and also and if you violate those monthly minimums, you're not up to it. There's a penalty. We don't have any penalties or anything like that. So that's how we're a little bit different, is in that we can be pretty flexible when it comes to the terms.
So, for instance, we're in alcohol, there's real stringent laws on when we get to be paid, right? So our distributor pays us the moment that we drop off our goods in their warehouse for us.
That's great.
So we don't really have any long-term invoicing with the retailer, just in that space. So I think
What you're looking for is inventory financing.
that would be
I think it's the upfront inventory financing because you're looking for actually to pay the manufacturer, right? Up front for the new, yeah. So that'd be more so on the inventory financing side. Factoring is really when you have like, when it makes sense, I would think, for a brand, when you have like long-term payments and like, those are pretty rigid. Sorry, I didn't mean to talk about
No, I think that was helpful.
But cool. Well, Vanessa, thank you so much again. Thank you, everyone. And
Thank you.
we're around, obviously, to chat if you ever want to chat more about any of this stuff. We're here. Mary's on our team, and also we have Aaron and Karina floating around too. So happy to answer all questions when it comes to NFT. Vanessa, thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank
Mike.
you.